Hi everybody, I'm Jeff with Virginia Paranormal Investigations, and today we're at a private residence in Winchester, Virginia, where there's been quite a bit of activity going on over the past several years. They've seen an apparition of a man in a frock coat, a woman in Civil War era attire coming up out of the basement carrying a basket, and Linda interviewed the client and has some further activity that's happened more so recently.
Right. Luckily, the owner of the home, he's an elderly gentleman, but he's been keeping a log of things that have happened. And over the course of the years that he's lived here, he's experienced all kinds of noises and strange things that have happened. And some of the noises he reported hearing were footsteps up and down the hallway, and hearing 3 loud knocks on what sounded like a solid piece of wood, like perhaps a solid wood door. And he's also heard things like somebody dropping something on the floor of the office in the other room. So a lot of noises that can't really be attributed to mice. He definitely has something going on in the house, but he does have a lot of Civil War relics in the house too, and a lot of furniture that I suspect may be antique. So I'm wondering if perhaps there may be something that's, associated with that. That's attached to one of those objects. But we do also have the factor that the gentleman is sort of a sensitive. In his younger days, he described being able to go into a location such as the barbecue place that's right next to Devil's Den in Gettysburg. And when he walked in, he said, you guys definitely have something in here. He could feel in his chest, and he could just feel that there was something there. So he's had experiences quite a few times in the past and in the house now. So, but we're looking around right now for any evidence of an old house or a homestead that used to be here. He said there was no foundation, so we're suspecting that it could have been a log cabin, which wouldn't have had a foundation, would have been a dirt floor. Perhaps we can find something.
All right, Scott. So, how's it looking with the baseline EMF sweep here so far?
Pretty dead. I only got an alarm clock for a hit, which is, that's good for the base because that tells us we shouldn't be getting anything. So if we do get something, it's pretty likely that it could be haunted.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, we're just in the creepy basement right now, trying to get an idea of where to go, and that's all.
I'll put it on the light for you guys.
Cool.
It's surprising, like even near the furnace, like I would think, being that this is the furnace room, it would be going off.
Yeah, that's what I was getting worried about. Like upstairs, I was getting absolutely nothing. Usually we at least get something
Right.
near the lights and, in the walls, but I only got the alarm clock. And then, so yeah, usually with a lot of more electronic stuff around here, you get a signal, but we're not even getting that, so it's interesting.
And they are on. The EMF detectors are on, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I push the button.
Right. Okay. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
So we're down here in the basement. I just want to give an example. A lot of times with a light, the EMF detector will start going off about here. But with this one, we got to actually get up behind it to get this thing to go off. So the electrical wiring in this house is excellent. The EMF levels are not enough that they could affect the person, because a lot of times they can affect people. They can cause lightheadedness, dizziness, even as far as hallucinations. So we can rule out that as a factor to what's going on in the house here. So in the garage, even with the fluorescent lighting, not a single spike. And usually those fluorescent lights, the field comes down about 3 to 6 feet depending on the size of the lights and such. But still, nothing.
The air is thick or something.
You think that has a factor?
Feels like it. I feel like the air's thicker, and I don't know what that means. I'm just
Like humidity.
Yeah, kind of like
Yeah.
humidity. I mean, I don't know what the humidity is, but it's probably something we should look up. But I think that might be something of a factor with you know what normally goes on without all this. So the basement I felt kind of woozy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Like
Maybe-
vertigo, kind of.
Yeah, maybe there's some radon. I don't know, but that could be a factor.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is go through and we're going to take pictures all over. And what we do when we do this is we make sure that if we get something in a picture later on during the investigation, we compare it to the baseline picture that we took at the beginning of the investigation with the lights on and everything well lit, so we can determine if it's something paranormal, if it's something that's actually in the room that's just showing up a different way in that picture that's taken in dimmer light.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just did a exterior sweep and looking at the pines he was talking about. And,
What was the story with the pines?
he was just saying that before he moved here, he built the house in '79, and before then, already existed some pines and like a peach orchard, or was it a peach
Orchard,
tree?
yeah.
So it's
pear
kind of a
tree.
cozy little. Oh, is it a pear tree?
Yeah, pear
It's kind of a cozy little hill here, and with his descriptions of the apparitions you've seen, I'm guessing perhaps it was at one point an orchard for dating back to at least the Civil War. So. These are all kind of new, looks like.
Yeah, there aren't really any large trees that we can look at to see if there's any evidence of, wires or anything sticking out of it that may have indicated there was a homestead here. But we're going to continue around the front. The only tree we did find that was large was a poplar. They grow they grow fast.
Right.
And it's most likely not a Civil War era tree, of course.
Now, he did mention that the pine trees did have barbed wire in them when he cut them down.
Yes.
So,
Yes, that's
definitely
right.
something here before.
Yeah.
I feel like a UFO is just gonna shoot. Is there anything traumatizing you'd like to explain to us?
Just to see if you are talking to us, could you tell us one of our names? So, not a whole lot coming through the spirit box in the first spirit box session. We're going to try another location in the house and see what we can pick up.
Yeah.
We also ran the Paratech app just to experiment. Not that we believe it's necessarily going to work, but
Right.
you never know. But nothing really through that, just very vague,
Yes.
general, like word bank words.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly. So we are in the second bedroom where the maintenance man that had stayed here for the night was held down. He was too afraid to go back to sleep after that, so he evidently stayed up and he hasn't been back to spend the night since. So we're going to run an EVP session first and see if we can get anything.
Right, we also have an EMF detector on the bed over there
We do.
behind Scott, so if you
Yes.
guys hear that go off.
Oh, okay.
I'm Jeff,
Linda.
Scott?
David. Jacob.
and we don't mean to impose by any means, but we heard that there was someone in this room perhaps that may not like people staying in here. We want to know if that's true. If there's anybody here with us, could you tell us your name, please?
My stomach.
Scott's stomach. We also have the TV on out in the living room.
And people walking in the hallway,
Yes.
creaking sound.
Did you used to live on this land?
What year were you born?
We just have some voices coming from outside. Can you tell us the name of the maintenance guy that was staying in here?
Do you know what may have scared the dog when there was a dog living here? So standing in the second bedroom gave me a couple of really strange sensations. The first one, not long after we came in here, I started feeling like there was a cold or a wet sensation on the back of my knee, which was kind of odd because it's not cold or wet, and it's certainly not cold in the house. But then after that, as we stood here for another few minutes, all of a sudden I got really dizzy quickly, like somebody flipped a switch and all of a sudden got dizzy. And I started to get a bit of a headache too, like the pressure was building quickly in my head and sort of, at the temples I could feel it starting to ache. And I know that David said that he was feeling like the same thing. He started getting a really bad headache.
Oh yeah. It was like a few minutes after when she said that she was feeling dizzy. It started like pounding in the back of my head and started feeling like heavy, and I don't know. It's just really painful, I guess.
Was that the same type of headache you would describe it the same way?
and honestly, it was right about the same time that he started feeling it too, because it was about maybe 4 or 5 minutes after I started feeling dizzy was when the headache started coming on.
And we can't attribute it to EMF at all because, for one, the EMF detector didn't go off, and
No.
Right.
during our baseline sweep, there was no EMF in this house at all.
No, I still walked around the room trying to get one during the session, but nothing, no hits.
Nothing.
Not even the electrical outlet.
What we did is we started out with an EVP session in here, but the environment wasn't extremely conducive to an EVP session, so we switched over to the spirit box session. And there was a couple interesting things that we thought came through the spirit box, and we're gonna have to go back and listen to it again. But we might have caught the word basement actually coming through when we asked shortly after. We asked, where should we go?
Yeah, to speak to some spirits. I said, where should we go to talk to a spirit? And it sounded like it said basement. And a couple of us thought the same thing, heard the same thing.
Right, so we're going to go ahead and relocate down to the basement. Tom Swift and his aerial warship. Is that fiction?
I don't know.
Something they really made.
I don't know.
Scott's the historian.
I've never heard that book ever in my life.
I think Tom
but-
Swift is a author, isn't it? Or is it, I don't know. Certainly look like some old books. So can you try telling us your name?
If anybody else is down here, other than us, can you say your name, please?
There's a woman that's been seen coming out of the basement here with a basket in her hands. Do you know who that is? Reeboks? She's carrying Reeboks.
Maybe. It's kind of sounded like Lori.
Oh, you think so?
No? Maybe not.
I don't know.
If you were trying to tell us something just now, can you try repeating it?
Did you used to farm this land?
All right, so we finished up here in the basement, and we went into another section of the basement, and we did another EVP session, another spirit box session. Now, some interesting stuff, and we're gonna have to go back and review. But it sounded like we heard what was described as kind of rummaging out here in the main part of the basement, and we thought the client was still down here. So we decided to take a walk around and look, and we didn't see him down here. He wasn't down here anywhere. We looked through the whole basement. He wasn't here. Turned out he was upstairs. He wasn't going up the stairs at the time this was happening or anything like that. He was already upstairs. So we're going to have to review the recorder at that time and see what exactly that sounds like, because there is a possibility it could have been the pipes, because we did hear like a tapping from the water pipes later on that we did identify as the water pipes, and we just want to make sure we can kind of rule that out. So hopefully we'll be able to do that via the recording.
Right. So we have analyzed some of the audio that came from the residence that we were at up in Winchester. This is actually north of Winchester, about 10 miles out. Kind of in the middle of nowhere, so, you know, you expect to get evidence in some places and you don't expect it in others. And this was really one of those places we just didn't expect to get anything. However, some of the evidence that we walked away with, as far as the audio from the spirit box sessions, makes this perhaps some of the most interesting spirit box sessions that we've ever done. And the reason being because we got a lot of what seemed like direct answers to our questions. We weren't getting a lot of extraneous radio chatter coming through like we do in a lot of places. Now, the first place that we went to was the office. We got very little from the office. A couple of things that weren't easy to understand. At one point it sounded like a male voice said might be 700, but that didn't really relate to the questions that we were asking. However, there was a point when the owner was looking at his telephone. He was trying to find this man's name in his contact list, and it did sound like a guy said, "I need his phone book," but it was kind of quiet and hard to understand. So we've skipped ahead to the second bedroom. In the second bedroom, there were some strange things that were going on. As far as, you know, the investigator David and I both got headaches. There was just kind of a strange feeling in that room, a feeling like pressure or something making you dizzy. But we did get a couple of things from that specific bedroom, and we'll see if we can play those here. This first one is going to be, you'll hear my voice come in asking, "Can you tell us your name?" or something to that effect, and then you'll hear a response after it. "If you can you try to tell us your name?" Now, what comes through is kind of high-pitched, and definitely the 3-syllable word. To me, it sounded like Pamela. So, you know, I don't know whether it was or not, but that's what it sounded like.
I definitely heard that 3-syllable word, like you said. My first thought, without you telling me anything, was Evelyn.
Yeah.
But then again, that's assuming that it was a spirit communicating. There is also a possibility that it could have been something on the radio station that was coming across.
Right.
Part of a song or just a fragment of speech that came through.
Yes.
And being how, I guess, indecipherable this one was.
Right, right.
Like we couldn't tell exactly what it
Yeah,
said.
it's hard
That's
to
also a
discern.
possibility there too. So, you know, we're showing
Right.
this as some possible evidence, but that one's not definite. More interesting stuff to come though.
Right, right. There was actually one more thing in the second bedroom as well. If you remember, this was something that we all understood immediately with just by listening to the spirit box. We asked, "Is there somewhere in the house where we should go to talk to the spirits?"
And it said to the basement.
It said basement.
And you have that on recording here.
I do. I'm not exactly sure where in the clip that it is. For some reason, I didn't write the numbers down, but we did. And when I was analyzing the audio, I did actually find
What's the next one that we have up? Is that from the same room?
No, the second one that we have up is from the basement, which the basement, of course, we went down there immediately when this thing said go to the basement. And the basement is where we probably got some of the most interesting information from. Down in the basement, about maybe 50 seconds into the whole spirit box session, we got an answer or some sort of a response through the spirit box that was actually repeated twice during the spirit box session in different ways. Now, this one, the first one, you can hear fairly clearly. My name is Linda.
Jeff.
My name is Linda.
Jeff.
Now you can hear just as soon as I finish saying Linda, you can hear something say scared of it, or I'm scared of it.
Yes, right before I say my name.
Right. So if you want to play that again. My name is Linda.
Jeff. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Scared of it.
Hopefully it wasn't referring to me.
Right. Exactly. Now, a little bit further on, there was another thing, like I said, where we were asking, we were saying our names again, I think reiterating them or something for some reason. And again, we heard the same sort of thing, but this time when I say, my name is Linda, you can hear the name Linda being overlaid by a different voice who says it at the same time I do. And then he says, I'm scared of it. So in other words, it comes in and says, Linda, I'm scared of it. But me saying Linda is overlapped by him saying Linda. So you can kind of hear that here as well. It may take a second to get to it. My name is Linda.
Jeff.
And I'll play it one more time. My name is Linda.
Jeff.
So very weird. Something very weird there. I did notice that while we were down there, whenever I would speak, the spirit box would speak at the same exact time. I'm not sure what that had to do with, but sure enough, when I analyzed the audio, we came back and caught this, and you can hear that, Linda, I'm scared of it. So obviously somebody was scared of what we were using, of the device that we were using, and probably the way that we were using it. So at first, we weren't real sure why they would be scared, but then came a little bit of further evidence down the road that actually sort of explained it.
Now I have to say that this one here was probably my favorite,
Right.
because a lot of times, we'll rip these things apart and say, what could this possibly have been? Could it have
Right.
been something on the radio?
Yes.
Like we did with the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other ones that we're not even going to show you because we couldn't decipher them. We couldn't really, they weren't enough for us to say, this is even possibly something.
Right, right.
But this one, when I heard this, Linda was listening to it through the headphones, and I heard this voice say, Linda, and I'm thinking, that sounds like somebody that was sitting there in the room.
It does.
Saying Linda over your voice.
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah, but I can tell, of course, by listening to this and listening to all of the investigators' voices who were there, which it was just, as far as men were concerned, just you and David and Jacob.
And Scott.
And Scott.
Right.
But Jacob didn't say anything,
Right.
the whole time. David said very little. And nobody would have actually said my name.
No one would have said that, especially not when we were saying our names.
Right.
Because that's one thing, we make sure that, we go and say them around in order, and no one talks over anybody.
Yes.
No one would say anybody else. And that was something that we would have heard. I'm surprised we didn't hear that while we were there.
I know.
Which means it did come from the spirit box, because like Linda said, a lot of times the spirit box would come across with something at the same time someone was talking.
Right, right.
And this is one of those cases. In the recorder, it's closer to the spirit box than it is to any of us.
It is.
So that's why we're able to hear it so clear through this.
Yes.
And for it to say Linda, I mean, that,
yeah.
I didn't even think for a
That's
second
pretty
that was
cool.
anything else. So that's some pretty good stuff right there.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
What's the
Yeah.
next one that you have?
So the second one that we have here came along when we were asking about why did you come to this land, or why were you on this land? And there's a little bit of lag time between the end of my question and the beginning of the response, but the response definitely to me sounds exactly like a perfect response for this. Now here we go. It's going to be a little loud. How did you come to live on this land? now I'll play that end piece one more time, because that's where it is. Okay. Now, when I listened to this, the first thing I understood it saying is for the acreage, or perhaps because of the acreage, which makes perfect sense. For the acreage. Makes perfect sense. You know, they would have come for the acreage because this is land that, you know, a lot of land in one place, mostly treed, beautiful mountainous sort of land. So, you know, anybody would come there if they wanted some sort of acreage.
Does it sound like it's saying it with some kind of an accent, though?
Perhaps a little bit of an accent.
Like the acreage, like that?
Yeah. For the acreage. Yeah,
right,
there's a
something
little,
like that. Because when I first heard it, I thought it sounded like an auto-toned club song, perhaps.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
then when you said the acreage, and you know, when I think of like a Amish person, perhaps,
right,
saying acreage,
right,
they may say it more like that.
Yes, and actually that's what's leading us into the next clip. And this is another really interesting one, and it sort of started putting together and tying together all of the threads, you know, in this whole investigation. It really was another clue that sort of brought us right to what we believe is happening with this house. And here it is again. I believe I asked the question, and then it's a little lag time before you actually get to the response. But we'll play it here, and then I'll go over the response a few times. Is there anyone buried on the property? Okay. Now, what you're having here is you've got two different responses. One of them may be extremely difficult to hear. The second one at the very end where you see this red line is much easier to understand. But after going over this first part again and again and again, I was able to decide. Okay. What you heard, the first part of it said several people. And this was probably a man's voice, very low, very hard to understand over the ch-ch-ch-ch of the spirit box. But then a female comes in at the very end, and what she says is they were Amish. So we'll play that in one more time. They were Amish. Which, you know, it took me a little while to be able to understand exactly what they were saying, but one of the things that the owner had been talking about was seeing an apparition of a woman in what looked like Civil War era clothing coming up out of the basement, and she was always carrying a basket. And then they'd also seen at one time a man in a sort of frock coat. So that would perfectly explain him seeing these people dressed the way that they were. It could be that perhaps these people weren't from necessarily the Civil War era. They might have actually been Amish because they would wear that sort of clothing as well. And who knows how much detail you can see in a spirit's dress or coat. So and that really, you know, made a lot of sense to us. And it also made sense that there were pear trees found on the property when he moved there and built his house there. So someone had been growing fruit trees and stuff on the property. They had been, you know, using wire as fencing at one time because he found it wound around the trees. These are all things that the Amish would have done. And certainly the Amish do have a community up there in Northern Virginia as well. So we think that perhaps these Amish people moved onto the property. For some reason they died there, and perhaps their spirits are still lingering.
That was interesting, of course. And once again, you know, as this stuff is being presented here, keep in mind that a lot of times there is what we talk about all the time, the audio pareidolia that can bits and parts of speech that can be on the radio can kind of put a response that we may hear that you know may not be exactly what it's saying. But with Linda analyzing this and listening to it several times, that's what she came up with, and
Yes.
it is pretty interesting how all that ties together with the Amish.
It
and
is.
such.
It definitely is.
Now, any these recordings here, along with a few other ones that we have, once we get them together, we'll post them on our website, probably VAParanormal.com, or else
Right.
one of the social media sites.
Yeah.
Maybe Instagram at Virginia Paranormal. You'll probably be able to find them on there too. But we'll post those once we get those all together and such.
Right.
But overall, an interesting investigation. I think it is interesting
Very.
evidence. So until next time, I'm Jeff,
And I'm Linda.
and thanks for joining us.